Hello, everyone, and welcome into this episode of the Bear Down Buzz podcast. Myself, Eli, as always, joined by Joe and Isaac. Fellas, it is Jaguars week. We face the Jacksonville Jaguars across the pond in London. Lots to get to, but first, we'll kind of start, as always, with the injury report for both teams. And it's kind of become a tradition. Joe, I will toss it to you if you want to look at some of these injuries for the Chicago Bears.
Yeah, so the Bears injury report, uh, Jaquan Brisker's out with a concussion. He uh ended up suffering a concussion on that big hit to Tommy Tremble last week. Uh, he didn't know. Well, he didn't get taken out of the game. He wasn't feeling the effects of it until the day afterwards. So he went in Monday, reported concussion symptoms, and then they took him. Then they said he's not traveling with the team. And although he could have come at a later date, with the way concussion protocol is now in NFL, but wasn't likely to happen. And um, Eberflus confirmed that yesterday when they talked about Elijah Hicks playing in Brisker's spot. Teven Jenkins did not practice today with with his ankle injury. He was listed on as limited yesterday on the injury report, but they also didn't practice. They had a walkthrough, which is different. So all the injuries yesterday, like that were reported, that's all estimations. So I'm a little skeptical that Kevin will be ready for Sunday. Mercedes Lewis didn't practice for the rest day, like always on Thursday. Zach Pickens again is not practicing with a groin injury. Terrell Smith with hip injury did not practice. Harry Stevenson popped up on the injury report with a calf injury. He was limited. That's not a good sign. Tyler Gordon was back in practice for full today. Again, yesterday he was limited, but it wasn't a practice of the walkthrough, so a little different. Then Jacob Martin, he came back yesterday off of injury reserve and participated in full in the walkthrough and full in practice today. So, I mean, the biggest names on here are obviously Tevin and Jaquan. Jaquan's not playing because he's not in London, and Tevin I don't think he's going to play. And then I guess the third biggest name is Larry Stevenson, because if we're missing him, I mean that tests our cornerback depth, which we saw was okay and which we saw was pretty good in preseason, but you still don't want to be missing one of your top cornerbacks during the regular season against Jaguars team. Even, even though they've been struggling, does have decent wide receivers.
Yeah, so Isaac, any big names on this injury report that you care to comment on?
Um, I I do want to highlight one player, and I do want to ask you and Joe this question, and it's regarding Teven Jenkins. So, I was watching a press conference today with Shane Waldron, and they were asking him what was the thought process into putting Bill Murray in at left guard when Teven Jenkins went down. And Waldron was talking about how Murray has impressed ever since he got here, and he's proved himself, and he deserves to be able to plug in at starter for left guard for the Bears. And with everything that's been going on with Tevin Jenkins' career in Chicago, and with this being his contract year where he's going into an offseason where he might not be re-signed, what is your guys' thought process, and would you want to re-sign Tevin Jenkins? Because to me, personally, I do think Tevin Jenkins was our best offensive lineman for a long time. I think he still is. He's just had an unlucky series of injuries throughout his tenure with the Bears. And I don't know how much money he's looking for. I know that they were talking about contract over the offseason, and then the Bears just said, you know what, well, we're gonna stall this. We're gonna wait until next season to bring up the contract situation again. Um, for me, I would say maybe a team-friendly deal would be good for Tevin Jenkins. I don't know if I'm willing to pay him the amount of money that a top NFL guard will get at this point in time. So I'll ask you, Eli, first. What were your thoughts on if the Bears should re-sign Teven Jenkins, and if not, why?
Yeah, so I'm completely with you on the last few years. Teven, when he's been healthy, has been one of our best offensive linemen, if not our best. And it comes to the point when you have to balance, again, you kind of mentioned it, how much you want to pay him, how many games out of the year are you going to have him being healthy and performing at a high level. But at the same time, we've seen Ryan Poles pay some of these players on Chicago, not top of the market money, but he's done a great job of signing these players to team friendly deals, and they've aged pretty well. I know the Jalen Johnson deal, for example, has aged really well. The Cole Kmet deal, I believe he's now like the 11th or 12th highest paid tight end in the league, and he's performing at a high level. And the list goes on and on, but it just boils down to how many games will you be able to get Teven healthy and playing at a high level? And so far this season, it has not been the case. Now, if he's healthy, yeah, he needs to be the starter, but you can't keep playing this game every week of, are you going to have him? And if you do have him, is he going to be at 100%? Is it going to be at 85%? And it's always, it seems to be just a different injury with Teven. Like for the longest time, it was the back issues coming out of college. That was his whole knock coming out um, of Oklahoma State. And the Bears went with him anyway. And then it reared its ugly head in the first few years of his career. So as of right now, I'm leaning no. I don't think the Bears should extend him just because I feel like in any year there's always plenty of great guards in the draft, and I think this year there are a few guards that you could point to that might be able to be on Chicago's radar. But to sum it up, yeah, I love Tevin to death, and I wish he could stay healthy and play at a high level constantly, but I wouldn't extend him at this point. So Joe, I'll toss it to you on what your thoughts on Tevin.
So I'm gonna start this answer off with a topic we talked about on Tuesday, or maybe last Thursday, whatever it was, when we talked about if we should trade for Wyatt Teller trade deadline. If we do that and we get a Wyatt Teller at the trade deadline, then no, you don't keep Evan and you draft his replacement in the draft. But if we don't trade for a right guard, it's going to be most likely where you go first, and then you got to get a center. And, well, actually, I'm not too sure how long they have Ryan Bates on your contract for. Is it another season after this? Because if that's the case, then Bates will probably be our center next year. We won't need to draft a center in 2024, 2025. But so if we don't end up trading for right guard at the trade deadline, then I think the Bears probably re-sign Teven and like maybe do a team friendly deal, like you're saying, Isaac and Eli said. But I think they can also maybe in the later rounds draft somebody that's could be a backup and maybe a replacement for Tevin if he continues to get hurt. And maybe you don't sign Tevin to like a 4-year deal, and maybe you sign him to like a 2 or 3-year deal where you don't give him you give him a lot of money up front, and then like in years 2 and 3, or at least in year 3, there's not a lot of money to give him. So if he's continues to get hurt, you can cut him. Um, but what I mean, my opinion, I don't know what my opinion is because like I agree with everything you said, and obviously I just kind of said the same thing. But like I like Tevin. He's hurt all the time, and when you're hurt all the time, it's hard to make a good argument for keeping you, even though when you're in and you play, you're good. Like it's just hard to make an argument for keeping them or keeping a player like that. So at the end of the day, um, especially since he hasn't stayed healthy the first half of the season, which I'm like 60% sure that if he played all the first 7 weeks, 6 weeks, they would have started talking to Tevin with the trade deadline to get his contract done. But I think since he's not been healthy, I don't know if they're going to do that. I'm not going to wait to the end of the year now. So I just don't think he has a future in Chicago. And I mean, I guess I am kind of back on what I said, earlier when I said that it'd be smart to keep him if they don't trade for a right guard at the trade deadline. But even if they don't, I can see a world where we try to sign either a right guard or a left guard if agency does not name Teven Jenkins, and then draft the other position. Uh, so I just don't know if Teven stays with us after this season, which stinks.
Yeah, it is really disappointing. Best case scenario is that he just gets healthy, and you would think that maybe the Bears would consider just going with Murray for. I mean, they went with him last week when Teven got hurt. Maybe stick with him this week if Teven doesn't go, and then give him another week just to let Teven rest up for this more difficult part of our schedule. But that's kind of looking at it with rose-colored glasses because it seems like if Teven is somewhat healthy, they're going to put him into the lineup. Like that's just what they've done this year. Um, but it is unfortunate that we're all kind of on the same page when it comes to Teven and his future in Chicago. Um, to get back to the injury report, just to kind of look at it, I agree with you guys. The big one is Tyreek being added to the injury report and Kyler Gordon uh, coming back being full. I think that's a great addition for us to have him healthy, and getting Jacob Martin back might help shore up this run defense that we've talked about in the last few weeks. Um, and another one to me, just quickly to add on to, that's kind of starting to worry me is that Terrell Smith has been on this injury report, I think, since week 1 or 2. And it just seems to me that he just has not been able to get off of this injury report. He did not participate today in practice. So that's one to keep an eye on, especially if Tyreek, for whatever reason, can't go. Terrell has slid in multiple times in his tenure, and I think has performed pretty well. So he's a good depth piece for us. But that's
I
just my thoughts on that. Go ahead, Joe. Yeah.
Sorry, I do have a question. I think we've talked about this before. Uh, Jaquan Brisker and how he gets hurt every year. What are your guys' thoughts on like him and how often he gets hurt? Because when he's on the field, he's great, but he's another one that doesn't stay on the field every game. So I just don't know. Like last year, I was kind of off the Jaquan Brisker bus because he didn't really play a lot.
Yeah, I was in the same boat as you. I will say it seemed like he did a lot more talking than he did performing, and that kind of didn't sit well with a lot of fans. But this year he has produced, and I agree. I think this is like concussion number 3 for him, if I'm remembering that right. So for him not to be able to stay healthy, but I think it just boils down to his play style. Like he is a hard hitting safety, and he's going to come up and make plays. Uh, you can send him on the blitz, and he'll be all for it. So it's tough to balance for him because that is his play style. He's that aggressive safety that's going to come up and hit you, but he just has to be more cautious of where um, he puts his head on these plays. Obviously, this Tommy Tremble play I think was Tommy Tremble's fault. Like Jaquan Brisker just made a good play, and it was unfortunate that Tremble put his head down. But that's just football in general. These accidents happen, but just in general, Brisker's play style, it's tough to ask him to kind of ease up just because that's who he is. But at the same time, it is something that he needs to work on. Maybe Isaac, your thoughts on Jaquan Brisker?
Yeah, Brisker is an interesting case because I remember last season I would watch games with my little brother, and there'll be a player down on the field and they won't show who it is, and I'll look at him and be like, "It's Brisker, huh?" And he's like, "Yeah," and then they'll show and it's Brisker. I really like Brisker. I think that he's definitely one of the leaders on defense, especially when they always do that flapping their hands gesture. And it's definitely going to be a topic of conversation when it gets closer to whether the Bears should re-sign him or not, because he does he does get injured a lot, but I think he's important to the team, especially on defense. And I think it's not, I mean, his play is a good reason why he's a leader, but it's also because he's the one that kind of creates a lot of energy on defense. A lot of the guys rally around Brisker, and I've noticed that through Hard Knocks and then during the season. So I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I'm not a big fan of players that can't be on the field. The same thing that we were talking about with Teven. But with Brisker, if he could just continue to stay healthy, I know I do agree with what you were saying, Eli. I think it was definitely Tommy Tremble's fault. It wasn't Brisker's. But we'll see. We'll see how the rest of the season pans out for him. And I'll toss it back to you, Eli.
Yeah, so we've talked about the injury report, Quan Brisker and Teven Jenkins, but I think it's time to really get into this matchup against Jacksonville in London. So, before you guys, do you have
think
anything else to add?
think we should touch on the Jaguars injury report because they have a lot of key
Yeah,
players that have been limited this week in practice. Although some of them I think are going to play, but I'll go run through it real quick. So, uh, both of their starting safeties look to be injured. Uh, Da- Darrell Darrell Thomas, has a hamstring injury. He's been limited uh both days this week. Gabe Davis has a knee injury. He's been limited at both days this week. Evan Ingram, he hurt his hamstring, I think, back in week 2, right before the game, like in warmups. So I think from what I've heard, it sounds like he's gonna go this week. I mean, it's gonna be a game time decision, but it sounds like he's on track to play, and then which is good with his benefit to the Jaguars because he was their leading receiver last season. Uh, Nasir Abdullah, a linebacker, has been limited with neck issues this week. Uh, Devin Lloyd, a linebacker, has been limited with knee injuries. Darnell Savage, their other safety, has been limited with quadriceps. Travis Etienne, their lead running back, hurt his shoulder last week, and he's been limited. And then their uh, number one cornerback, St. Campbell, has a hamstring injury. It, I'm pretty sure from what I've heard, it sounds like he's probably going to go too. They're going to get their leading cornerback back, which is good for them because their defense hasn't been great, especially the secondary. We'll talk more about that in a little bit, but that's their injury report. Well, I don't know if you guys want to touch on any of those players. If you don't, it's fine. But
yeah. Thank you for going over that because that was originally I was going to go over that, but then I completely went away from it and forgot. So, thanks for covering that, Joe. But I think the biggest one, at least for our defense, will be Evan Ingram because, as you mentioned, Joe, their lead target last year, just a monster year, just a monster revival for him in general. Um, but another one I think that's interesting is Travis Etienne because in the last few weeks, I think the split between him and Tank Bigsby has slowly gone in favor of Tank Bigsby. So this might be a game to where we see more of Bigsby, and it's tough to prepare sometimes for a running back that you don't have a lot of tape on. But from the limited tape that we've seen from Bigsby, he is explosive, and that's not really what you want for this Bears run defense that hasn't been great. So that'll be a matchup to pay attention to. But aside from that, the Gabe Davis knee injury is kind of interesting because um, that is a somewhat thin wide receiver room. Like it's not terrible, but it's not great at the same time. Um, but yeah, that's my thoughts. Joe, Isaac, do you have any thoughts on this injury report for the Jags?
No, but I'll transition to what I think some keys to win the game are. And the first one is that according to Football Insights, the Chicago Bears are the best team in the NFL in terms of team coverage rates. So basically what that means is they have a really good secondary. The secondary has been playing really well this season, and conversely, that the Jaguars have the worst team coverage rates. So I know Joe was going to get into the Jaguars secondary later, but it's going to be interesting to see how Caleb Williams does against a really just poor Jaguar secondary, and then vice versa, how Trevor Lawrence does against our Bears secondary. But I think the one thing that I'm kind of worried about is the Jaguars pass rushers, Josh Hines Allen and Trevon Walker going up against Darnell Wright and Braxton Jones because Braxton Jones did have the best game of his season. This Sunday against or last Sunday against the Panthers, he had 0 pressures allowed, which is fantastic. And then it looked like Darnell Wright had a better game than he's had, during the season. So it's going to be interesting to see if they're going to be able to protect Caleb Williams because Josh Hines Allen and Trevon Walker are one of the better pass rushing duos in the NFL. So I wanted to, see what you guys thought about that matchup, and I'll toss it over to Joe. What were your keys for the game against the Jaguars?
Okay, yeah, I definitely had the Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker as you got to stop them. Trayvon Walker's coming off his best game of the season and probably his career. He had 3 sacks, could have had a fourth, had a couple pressures. So, him and Allen are kind of the same L as and Daniel Hunter and Will Anderson, which we had a trouble stopping them when we played the Texans. We cannot have another disaster like that. But you brought up their secondary, and their secondary has allowed 21 deep passes, 21 passes over 20 plus yards this season. Um, so the Bears finally hit some deep plays last week. They need to attack deep again this week. They need to go as deep as many times as they can. I know we've been complaining about how a lot of Shane Watson's stuff is deep, but this week it looks like it's going to work because they just can't seem to stop the deep ball. The 2 deepest plays were both touchdowns. One was a 65-yarder. One was an 80-yarder to Tyreek Hill when they played the Jaguar or the Dolphins in week 1, and then 65-yard touchdown last week to Alec Pierce. So they have both of those. Well, obviously Tyreek's one of the fastest players in the league. Alec Pierce is pretty fast too. And the Bears have DJ Moore and Rombunze, who are both really fast guys. So they're not as fast as Tyreek, but they're still pretty dang fast. So I feel, but they should be able to take advantage of this uh bad, bad Jaguar secondary. And even if they get their leading cornerback back and their safeties come back, I don't know. That's going to help, obviously, but I don't think that's going to be as big of a boost. Uh, like, I don't think that's going to be enough to stop their deep, uh, deep passes, at least in the first week they're all back. Because, uh, actually, I don't know. I think Darnell Savage was there last year, but I don't know if the other safety was there. Um, and so I feel like they're still going to have some time to get used to each other when they're all finally back fully healthy. So I think the Bears need to throw the ball deep, and then obviously you got to continue to that running game that wasn't that great, was decent last week, but it obviously helped Caleb see the field better. And if we can't get the running game going, even though the Jaguars give up a lot of deep stuff, I don't think we're going to get that if we can't get a running game going.
Yeah, so I'm 100% with you guys. I think this is the week that we really see this connection with the deep ball really evolve. We've seen it time and time again, missed shots down the field from Caleb, but this last week, I think really bodes well for his progression in that department, just because we saw the deep shots to Keenan Allen and to DJ Moore multiple times throughout that game. But I think this week especially is when you're going to see a lot from Rome Odunze. I think we've seen it. I think most of us have seen it on Twitter, just the different clips of Rome Odunze streaking down the field, just wide open. I think this is the week that we see a lot of those shots get completed from Caleb to Rome. Uh, we saw it in the Colts game. That connection was on point, and I think this is another week where they have to take advantage of Rome Odunze's skill set and his ability to get open and at some points win those contested catches, because he hasn't had a bad year by any means, Rome Odunze. It's just a crowded room, but I think this is the week that you really see that connection develop, and I think we have to have that connection develop to have success in this matchup, because we've seen in multiple instances in the last few years that if the Bears get down by multiple scores, it's tough for them to come out of it offensively. They just, for whatever reason, they just can't seem to dig themselves out of a hole. So if we can get up 7 or 10 to nothing and just let our defense keep us there and let the offense continue to develop, this can be a game where we can win by 10 points or so. I truly believe it's just a matter of, like you guys mentioned, get the run game going and continue to take these shots And this is a week where I think they can really do it. Joe, did you have something?
Yeah, one more thing I wanted to add is the Jaguars uh tackles, offensive tackles aren't that's their weakest part of their offensive line. Uh, which is good because we have obviously Montez Sweat, so and then Terrell Taylor, Austin Booker, and those guys. So hopefully Sweat can finally get going. He's going up against let me pull up the name real quickly. But the player he's matched up against has given up the most sacks on Jaguars. So if he could, I think this is the week where he gets right and finally gets. I mean, he has 2 sacks and multiple pressures, but I feel like he finally gets like a 2 sack game with like 7 or 8 pressures this week. I'm gonna pull up one. Give me one more second to get the name here. Um,
Yeah,
I
you're
feel
good.
bad here.
No, don't worry about it. While you're
Um,
finding that, I wanted to bring up something just real quick. The Jaguars, according to FoxSports.com, have allowed 105.6 rushing yards per game. So they're right there in that mix of to where they don't have a great run defense. Allowing over 100 rushing yards per game isn't great. Um, but another factor in that is that they're tied for seventh most rushing touchdowns allowed with 6. The Bears, in case you're curious, have also allowed 6 rushing touchdowns through this year. So while the Jaguars have done a better job allowing rushing yards per game, the Bears are at like 120, I believe, if I'm reading this right. Yeah, 120.8. So I think the rushing defense is somewhat similar, at least in the red zone. So Joe, I'll toss it back to you.
uh, Cam, Cam Robinson, I'm pretty sure is who went Montez Sweat, will be going up against, and he's given up 13 pressures this year, which is most on uh the Jaguars. So, like I said, he should hopefully be able to finally get going in a good way. And this is also the first week he hasn't been on the injury report, so hopefully that means he's healthy enough to where he could just attack and not think about injuries.
Okay, so I want to kind of switch gears and kind of think about the quarterback matchup here. Jacksonville hadn't seen a lot of offensive success until last week when they beat the Colts 37-34. We saw a stat line from Trevor, 28 of 34, which is an 82.4% completion rate, 371 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Now, what really boded well for the Jaguars was that rushing attack. From what I kind of mentioned earlier, Tank Bigsby had 101 yards on the ground, 7.8 yards per carry, and two scores in that game. So I just wanted to ask you guys, when it comes to the Jaguars offense, do you think that Trevor Lawrence, I know it's just a 1 game sample size, so you can't take it for a lot, but do you think he's found somewhat of a groove, or do you think this was just him facing the Colts defense? And Isaac, I'll start with you.
I think he definitely had a really good game last week against the Colts. And I'm not gonna say that the Colts are the reason why he had a good game. I think, and most of the time when a quarterback has a good game, it's more because of them and not because of the team they're facing. And I'm saying this because I saw a lot of people saying that, oh, Caleb Williams throwing for 300 yards and 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. It's because he played the Panthers, but I think it was more. I mean, the Panthers, yes, they're a bad team. I get that, but I don't know if you guys have been seeing the clips. It was really windy on Sunday, and so I'm not discrediting Caleb's performance. I think if anything, he was playing more against the weather than the actual Panthers. But I do want to say that I feel like Trevor Lawrence is going to get humbled this week. I think the Jaguars are going to just not have a good game offensively, especially when we have such a good defense and they've been playing really well and they've been getting better every single game. So that's what I think on Trevor Lawrence. I'll pass it over to you, Joe.
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, the Colts defense sucks. I mean, we weren't able to do anything against them, but they suck. They're just not a good defense. So yes, I think that helped Trevor get back on track. I don't think Trevor's a bad quarterback. He played bad. I think he had one terrible game this year, and that was against the Bills. Every other game, he hasn't had a great stat line, but it hasn't been terrible like it was against the Bills. Like that was a Monday night game. I don't know if you guys watched it. He had a he had a really bad interception where he just overthrew his guy, which he doesn't normally like. I've never seen him do it that bad before, where he just completely airmailed it like 10 yards past his receiver. I haven't seen him do that. And I like Trevor Lawrence. Uh I've liked him ever since he came in to the league. I thought I think he's been really good. Well, not really good. I think he's been good. I don't think he's been as good as people thought he was going to be when he came in. I mean, he did bring the team back from a 27-point deficit and 4 interceptions in the playoff in a wild card game against, I said, it was the Chargers, who didn't have a good head coach, but still, it's really impressive. I, but yeah, just to bring it around, I think this is going to be a challenge for Trevor. I think the Bears are the best defense that they have faced this. I mean, they played the Browns in week 1. And at that point, I guess the Browns defense probably hadn't given up on the season yet, because they probably still thought Deshaun Watson was going to, or maybe that was week 2. They played the Browns, but because they played Miami in week 1. So I think it was week 2 they played the Browns, but they played them before they probably really gave up on the season, because right now I think the Browns just don't feel like they're going anywhere because Deshaun Watson has sucked the last 5. Well, it sucks since he's gotten there, but this year it's been really like he hasn't played good at all. Last year, at least before he got hurt, he played well in one game, which isn't anything special, but like he looks like at that point he was gonna start to string stuff together, and then he got hurt. So, and then when he came back this year, he just hasn't looked good at all. Um, but yeah, I think this is going to be a challenge for Trevor. I don't think he, I don't think he's not up for the challenge. Even though that sucks to say it, because obviously we want the Bears to win, but I think Trevor can like play well against this Bears defense, even though we don't want him to. I'm not going to predict that this week, but I think theoretically he could. Um, so yeah,
Yeah, I'm right there with you guys. I've always been a Trevor Lawrence guy, and I think in some instances he's just been dealt a bad hand, whether it be with coaching or that first year where his offensive line was not up to par and he was hit a bunch. But um, I just bring it up because it's going to be the first time that Caleb faces another first overall pick, and I think that's just a cool thing to kind of mention. Obviously, they're playing each other this week, so you need to talk about it. But um, it is just interesting, and I think Trevor, while he had a good game last week, I don't think this is another week to where he can just stack another great performance and get the Jaguars back into the AFC South race. I think at this point, that division as a whole right now is just not playing very well. So anything could happen, but I don't think this bodes well for the Jaguars' chances in that race. Now, I'll knock on wood because this would be the week that something happened to where Chicago just falters, and you know what I'm saying. But yeah, I like Trevor, and I think it'll be a cool matchup for Caleb to play against another first overall pick. But as we move forward, is there anything else that you guys like to think about with this matchup, whether it be our run game versus their rushing defense, or just our receivers against their secondary? I know we've kind of touched on that. Do you guys have anything else?
I think you brought up King Bigsby earlier. We got to stop. I mean, listen, I've continually been complaining about our run defense. Bigsby, I mean, I haven't really watched much of the Jaguars, but I mean, I saw him a little bit last year. This is the second year in the league, correct? I'm pretty sure it is.
Yeah, I want to say so.
Yeah, I watched him play a little bit last year. We just cannot let him rush for 7.8 yards to carry against us. He's a big guy who could break a lot of tackles. Uh, but don't let him do that against us. We gotta stop him. We let Chuba rush. I mean, Chuba rushed for I think 5.8 yards a carry, but that was also up by 38-yard touchdown run. I think he would have been under like he would have been at like 4.5, I think, without that touchdown run. But we just gotta stop Hank Bigsby. And if we can't stop Hank Bigsby, I just I don't think we're gonna ever get this run defense figured out this year. Or
Isaac,
Travis Etienne, I guess. I think he's probably gonna play. But either way, we gotta stop those guys combined. Like if we can't, then we're just not gonna do it this year.
yeah, Travis Etienne is a great back, but he's had a little bit of a rough go of it this year too. Just that Jacksonville offense, aside from last week, hasn't really had a lot of success. But I do agree that the rushing attack defensively, I think if we can't get it going, it's going to be a tough day sledding for the Chicago Bears defense. But Isaac, did you have anything else for this Jaguars matchup?
No, I think you guys covered everything, but I'll just start today with the record predictions. For the Bears, you know, in the NFL, I have like different personal feelings of every quarterback, like every team's quarterback. Like there's some quarterbacks that I just like a lot more than other people might, and then there's quarterbacks that other people might like a lot more than what I initially like. You guys seem to be pretty high on Trevor Lawrence, and you know he's a good quarterback and everything. When he was coming out of the draft, I was like very like, oh, this guy's gonna be really good. Um, and I'm not discrediting that, you know, comeback performance in the playoffs or anything, but I just don't know if he's on the same level as where Caleb Williams is right now. I think Caleb Williams is a way better quarterback. And then you guys weren't comparing him, but I'm just saying like I'm not the biggest Trevor Lawrence fan. And I think that Sunday's game, I don't I don't have I don't think that he's gonna have like a breakout performance or anything against us. So I do want to mention though something that I forgot was I was supposed to mention today was when I was doing my record predictions for the Bears before the season started. I always know that the Bears have this one game where they should have won and they didn't. I didn't think that that was going to be the Colts game. I thought that we were going to take care of business on the road in Indianapolis. I did think, however, that this game in London was going to be that game where we felt like we should have won but lost. But right now, at this point in the season, I don't feel like that anymore. I do think that this is a game that we should win, and I do think that this is a game we will win. So for my record prediction, or my game score prediction, I think that the Bears are going to win 27-13. And then I'll toss it over to you, Eli.
Yeah, I think I can get behind something like that. I think just because the Bears offense has kind of found their way in the last few weeks, now you can make the argument about opponent and who's who and what's with that, but I don't necessarily I agree with what you mentioned earlier, Isaac. I think you just play who you play on the schedule. And at the end of the day, these are all NFL teams, and there are some talent discrepancies here and there, but again, you play who you play in front of you, and I think the Bears have finally kind of got something going. I think they kind of have an identity at this point. Now there's still a lot left to iron out, but I think they do have an identity moving forward. So I'm going to go. I don't think it's as dominant as it was last week. I don't think we reach 30 points again this week, but I do think we're going to see a lot of passing yards from Caleb. I think we might see another 300 yard game just because I feel like he's slowly finding his way and he's improved every week as we've hammered in the head the last few weeks. I'm gonna go Bears 24, and I'm gonna say that the Jaguars miss a 2-point attempt. So I'm gonna go with Bears 24 and Jaguars 16. I think that's kind of where I'm gonna land. Joe, you go ahead.
I'm gonna mention a couple of things that we haven't mentioned yet. So the Jaguars, they're basically London's team at this point. They play there almost every year. But they are delayed this week in their travel because of the hurricane that's hitting Florida this week. Um, so the reason I bring that up is even if they were if they were on time, I would say everything points to Jaguars winning just because London is their second home. They should win this game, even though Bears are the better roster. They're just more accustomed to being in London. But with the pushback of their flight and just the fact that the Bears have been there a whole week, I think the Bears are going to win this game. I'm going to say 20. I'm in between 27-17 and 24-17. Now, do I think it's going to be a 10-point or 7-point game? I'll go 7 points. So 24-17. Just because I think the Jaguars keep it close. I do think we continue our streak of not letting anyone score more than 21 points on us, which is very impressive.
Yeah, so I think we're all kind of in that same mindset of the Bears continuing this trend offensively and just finding their way as we go throughout this year. So I like all of these score predictions. You never want to be on the same page. Once again, you look at those analysts draft those game picks, and it always seems to jinx itself. But I do think that this overall is a winnable game for the Bears. Now, I don't think it's again another Panthers game where we just come out there and look like the better team on every aspect of football. But again, I think this is a winnable game for Chicago. And to kind of close this thing out, as we can mention the rest of the division games in the NFC North. Now, this is kind of an important week if you don't really think about it. That the Vikings are on a bye, so this gives the rest of the North an opportunity to get somewhat close in the standings to the Vikings. Obviously, they're undefeated at 5-0. But we will start with the Packers Cardinals game because I think this is actually a pretty interesting one. Now, the Cardinals defensively haven't been, I won't say they've been great. I don't think they've been awful, but the Packers have also gotten away with some things on offense throughout the season, I think. So this will be an interesting one that could potentially affect the standings. I want to pick the Cardinals to win this game. I just think it's one of those games that the mistakes by the Green Bay Packers finally catch up to them and they lose a game that they should win. So I'm going to pick this one to be a 23-20 Cardinals win. And Joe, I'll start with you because I know you have a pretty good knowledge of the Arizona Cardinals.
So Cardinals are coming off probably what's going to end up being their biggest win of the season. They shockingly beat San Fran last week in San Fran. I just see, I shouldn't pick Arizona. They shouldn't win this game. Green Bay is the better team. They have the better defense. They have more weapons on offense. They have probably similar offensive lines, but like I said, they have more weapons. They have a better running back. They have better receivers. I think Kyler's probably a better quarterback than Jordan Love is, but they shouldn't win this game. But I'm picking them because I want to pick the Cardinals because I hate Green Bay. So, let's say 20-17.
I like it. Go
Yeah.
ahead, Isaac.
Yeah, I was gonna say, going back to what I was mentioning about Trevor Lawrence and how I'm not the biggest fan of him. On the opposite end, I really love Kyler Murray. I think he's a good quarterback. I love him as a player. I don't like how he runs. I don't know why he just runs. It just irritates me when I watch him run. But I love the Cardinals offense. I love Marvin Harrison. I wish, and there's a way that we could have gone him and Rome. I mean, but I know that would never happen. And as much as I want to choose the Cardinals, the only thing that bothers me when I'm looking at this game is that they're playing in Green Bay. If they were playing in Arizona, I would have chosen Arizona to win, the Cardinals to win. But because they're playing in Green Bay, just everything that's been going on with Jordan Love and how he's just been so lucky recently, aside from the injury, I really I want the Cardinals to win. Like, I really want the Cardinals to win, but I think the Packers are just going to squeeze out barely. And what you were saying, Eli, 23-20 Cardinals win. I think it's going to be a 23-20 Green Bay Packers win. But I hope that I'm wrong and you guys are right. So
I want to add one more thing. I just looked the your you didn't mention the time. So they play at noon. So I'm thinking now I should change my prediction just because their Cardinals are a West Coast team, so technically they're playing at 10 a.m. their time. But I'm not going to change my prediction because I still think the Cardinals are going to win, or I still hope the Cardinals are going to win. But like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if Green Bay wins, especially because they're home. It's a noon game, and technically the Cardinals are playing earlier than they usually would. in their minds.
Yeah, so you know what's going to happen is that Green Bay is just going to go out and win like 36-14. It's going to piss all of us off, but that's just how it works. We can hope and dream for a Packers loss to put us ahead in the standings if we were to beat Jacksonville. But moving on to the next divisional matchup, Lions Cowboys. Now I think last year you had the whole drama with Detroit whining about the whole reporting and that kind of thing and blah blah blah. It was a whole storyline, and it just annoying from Detroit. It was they always like to complain about everything, but
And that was
it, it
that was BS. Detroit
no,
should have
I
won that game.
agree. I agree. They should have won that game. It was just funny because Detroit wanted to get on their high horse and everything like that, blah blah blah. But uh, this will be, I think, a blood match. I think Detroit is out for blood, and the Cowboys have underperformed this year. So I think this is a game that Detroit will not lose. I think it's going to be kind of like a 30-21 win for the Detroit Lions. Isaac, I'll toss it to you on this one.
Yeah, I'll be quick. I agree with you guys. I think it was BS. The Lions should have won. And then this game, it's gonna be a 1:25 p.m. game, or for you guys 4:25. But it's gonna be in Dallas. And what did you say something, Joe?
It's 3:25 here.
Oh, 3:25. There you go. Yeah. So I think that the Lions are gonna win. And if the Cowboys get blown out by the Saints the way they did, I don't expect them to beat a team that's on a whole different level with the Lions. So I would say that the game score would end up being it's probably gonna be a high scoring game. I would say maybe like 36-25 Lions win. And I'll toss it over to you, Joe. What do you think?
Listen, Detroit, I'd be very excited if they win this game. Their whole defensive line is hurt. They don't have DeMarcus Lawrence. They don't have Marcus Parsons. They don't have their rookie Marshawn Nealon. They haven't been performing well. Their cornerbacks haven't been performing well. The secondary as a whole. Defense has underperformed massively. Their offense also has. I don't think this is close. Uh 35-10, Detroit.
That is a big deficit, but I mean, I could
And
definitely see it.
that's sucks for me because I have CD Lamb and Dallas kicker in fantasy. So I need them to score points, but I just don't think it's close. And yes, Detroit's defense is still not the best, like in the secondary, but I don't know. I just don't see Dallas doing anything.
Yeah, I think we're all on the same page. I just think this is a game that the Detroit Lions cannot and should not lose. But when it comes to these mini rivalries, I think there's always a kicker there to where it's closer than it should be. I think Dallas wins this one. I just think it's going to be closer than a 35-10, but it would not surprise me because this Dallas team has just not looked good in any aspect this year. And it's surprising to me that they have a 3-2 record because it's felt worse than that for that team. So we're all kind of on the same page with that Cowboys matchup against Detroit. But it is a big week in the NFC North because if one team kind of falls out of it, then the race becomes a lot more clear, and possibly, if I don't think the Lions are going to lose to Dallas, but if they were to drop a game like that, that makes things a whole lot more close. If we can improve to 4-2 and Detroit dropping to 3-2 and possibly Green Bay dropping to 3-3, we're right there in that mix. And if we can get Minnesota to drop a few, that starts to make things really interesting. But this is
Big
all
game.
hypothetical. But Joe, did you have something?
No, big. It's a big game in the division next week.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's gonna
Minnesota
be
and Detroit. That's
yeah
gonna be a fun one to pick.
yeah it's a big week and it's gonna be super interesting. But before we head out, do you guys have anything else to add? I know we always support the support. So just go out there, subscribe to our YouTube channel, go follow us on TikTok, check us out on Reels, YouTube Reels, everything like that. And we greatly appreciate the support.
Uh, the last thing I'll say is if there's anyone that's listening to this in Florida for whatever reason, stay safe. Uh, yeah. A hurricane sucks. This is the second time you've been hit with a hurricane in like a month. So just stay safe.
Yeah, absolutely. Our thoughts go out to everyone that's being affected by that. Helene devastated the Carolinas, and now Milton went through Florida, and you just hate to see anything like that. So, thoughts and prayers to everyone out there. But again, before we head out of here, does anybody have anything else to add? All right. So I think we're going to wrap up this preview between the Jaguars and Bears over in London. I believe here in Central Time it starts at 8:30 or 9:30, Joe. I'm not 100% sure.
8:30.
8:30.
8:30
So
Central.
and then
9:30 Eastern, and then 6:30 a.m. Western,
Gotcha.
which is crazy.
So what time would that be for you, Isaac? Just out of
Yeah,
curiosity.
6:30. I'm gonna be up and early.
Yeah. I mean, you do it for the love of the game, man. That's
Yep.
Coffee football, baby.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
You drink coffee.
You're gonna
No,
need some for
I
sure.
know.
Yeah, it's gonna be cool. I can't remember. I don't really think I watched most of that London game when we played the Raiders. I think I caught like the second half of that one. So it'll be cool to be able to wake up earlier and just kind of have a morning Bears day. But
You
with
get to
that
watch
being
football all
said,
day.
what's that?
Did you get to watch football all day?
Yeah, I
You get to
know.
watch Bears and then 12, 3, and 6 or 7, whatever it is.
Yeah, so hopefully we can get the Bears win and then just enjoy the rest of the day of football. But to kind of wrap things up, that's going to do it for this preview of the Jaguars-Bears game over in London here on this episode of the Bear Down Buzz podcast. Thanks so much for watching. Again, be sure to like, subscribe, go check out our YouTube Reels, our TikToks, everything like that. With that being said, we're going to head out. Have a good one.